This is Marketing from the Front Lines, where we speak with B2B marketers who are in the trenches, bringing technology to market. Here's your host, Brett Stapper, CEO of Frontlines.io.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Marketing from the Front Lines. Today we're speaking with Barbara Lewis, CMO of Coactive AI. Barbara, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Brett.
Yeah, really excited to have you here. Let's go ahead and jump in with the big question of why and how did you end up in this world of marketing?
Yeah, that was a really crazy thing, actually. When I graduated from college, I went to strategic consulting and ended up in the Bay Area. And I was like, wow, there is some exciting stuff happening here in the Bay Area. And went into venture capital for a while. And that was like taking off like a rocket. It was the internet boom. And then I decided I was going to go to business school. And people were like, you're the craziest person ever. Why would you leave the best economy ever to like do something like graduate school? And then the market crashed. And I all of a sudden went from being an idiot to like being a genius. Like, wow, this is the best time ever to go to business school. And my dream was I'm going to, get my MBA and I'm going to go to a startup and it's going to be awesome. And the reality was by the time I graduated, the market was still really, really rough. And my graduating class at Stanford, it was one of the lowest percentages of people graduating with jobs in hand. Yeah. And people who were graduating were running into competing for jobs with people who graduated a year before and been laid off. So it was rough. And so I talked to a bunch of startups and the reality was like people were not interested in hiring fresh MBAs. And so a company called Siebel Systems interviewed on campus and they had a great reputation as a growing mid-sized software company of really having an awesome managerial program. And so I joined that and they kind of said, hey, you can be a product manager or you can be in marketing. And I looked around and there were 450 product managers at Siebel Systems. And I was like, wow, do I want to go be number 451? Or do I want to go into marketing and work on the same floor as a CEO with a group of like 30 people and, really be able to make much more of an impact? And at the time, it did not seem like a major decision. It seemed like I'm just making a decision for like this one point in time, but it actually started me off on technology marketing trajectory that I have been on ever since.
Was that the CRM company?
It was. Yeah, absolutely. So it had taken off like a rocket. It was one of the fastest growing software companies in history at that time. And it was doing a pretty good job of defying gravity in terms of the market at that time was not that great, as I mentioned, and Siebel Systems still kept plowing forward. Now, of course, a couple of months after I joined, it did hit some of that turbulence. And so it did have a couple of rounds of adjustment while I was there, but it was a pretty safe harbor. And it lived up to its reputation of being a good place to really learn how to be a manager, how to be a tech marketer. And I worked a lot with the product management organization as well.
I think I know about Siebel from, I can't remember the book right now, or the name of the book, Behind the Cloud, Beyond the Cloud, something like that. Mark Benioff's book.
Oh, Mark Benioff's book. Yeah. Okay.
What was it like competing with Benioff at the time?
It's really fascinating because the lore and reality are a little bit separate. Yeah. And there's a guy named Bruce Cleveland who was very successful at Siebel Systems. He went to formed a VC firm called Wildcat Ventures. He's now retired, but he has a marketing book out that's pretty good. And he wrote an article about this. And it's actually probably the best resource I've seen about it. But the reality of it was that although they were both in the CRM industry, they really did not directly compete because at the time, Salesforce was really going for a much S of the SMB play and delivering the product online, delivering a very early, simpler product. And Siebel Systems was selling $10 million deals to major enterprise companies. And so those things are not the same thing, right? So over time, now you say, wow, Salesforce sells to these major enterprise companies. At the time, they did not. I mean, the brilliant thing was that Benioff made it look like we were competing. And so they were drafting very cleverly off of, all the brand and marketing investment that Siebel Systems had made. But the reality was we were playing in different parts of the pond.
Were people talking about that? Like, did they know that strategy was happening from Benioff or?
Oh, no, it was so obvious. Yeah, it was so obvious. There was one, oh my God, it was so funny. Because I work with the designers and they're always checking out other people's websites. So they're checking out Salesforce's website. And the funny thing is if you came from a Siebel Systems IP address, you just saw like, hey, we're Salesforce and we do CRM for the people kind of stuff. But if you cloaked your IP address and went there, what you saw was like the Siebel Systems logo and then a big like X over it one day. And we were just cracking up. Like we thought it was so funny, but we were also like, "Why? Why would you bother? Yeah, like lead with who you are, not necessarily lead with who you're against." And the other thing about that lore, though, is it has led some other startups saying, "Hey, we want to be like Salesforce," down a path of doing things that like, "Oh, well, I think this is how Mark Benioff did it," and it's not exactly true. And actually, that's one of the things that Bruce Cleveland ends up talking about. Is I'll have to turf up that article. I think it's a really good one. I like to show it to people to say, "Hey, there's myth and then there's reality," and so then you kind of need to know the reality in order to really understand what happened.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, let's talk about your tolerance for pain, which may sound like a funny question, but you've worked at 8 different startups. So I have to imagine that, we're looking at it's here. You have to have a high tolerance that
I have a high pain and risk tolerance, which I think amuses some people who know me well, because while I have been very risk friendly in my career, there are a lot of other choices in my personal life that I just keep very steady and stable. And I think the analogy I draw is like, how Steve Jobs used to wear the same outfit every day because he was just trying to limit. He has to make so many decisions in a day that he was just like, you know what? I'm just going to go for the black turtleneck and the jeans today and tomorrow and every day. And so if it's like, hey, I've been driving the same car for like 20 years, but I love, startup companies, and I love the risk, and I love, solving hard problems and being in the trenches with technologists and working on, really new things and getting to introduce like really new and valuable things to the world. It's what gets me up in the morning.
And are you always the first hire or typically the first hire in for marketing?
I've done that multiple times. Yes. Yeah. I've done that multiple times. And the funny thing is, I kind of thought what a lot of people do is they'll be very early stage. And then as they mature in their career, they also mature in the stage. And so they keep getting kind of like bigger and bigger and bigger, or later and later and later in the stages. And I just love early stage and growth so much that I've had multiple times that I've had an offer in hand from a very early stage company and a very late stage company. And the late stage company is like, hey, we've got this super budget and we've got all these people and et cetera, et cetera. And the smaller stage companies like, well, we've got this hot new technology and we're trying to establish a new market and you're going to be person number one doing everything. And I've repeatedly picked, the early stage one. And maybe it's just a masochistic thing, but it kind of works for me and I enjoy it. I love building the teams. I love building the systems. And like I said, the earlier you are, often you're trying to crack the market and you're getting to understand a really unique problem and a really unique technology. And you also have the influence of like, hey, here's what we're hearing from the market. You get to work very closely with product management about how that product develops and how that product is positioned, as opposed to when you go to a much later stage company. A lot of those hard problems have been cracked and the problems are a little bit different. It's process, it's scale, it's hiring, it's like communicating across an organization. And those are hard problems to solve. I'm not going to diminish those, but they're different types of problems. And I've been at both ends. I've also been at a Series Z company, which was called Data.ai. It's $100 million in revenue. I had a global team like Beijing, Seoul, Japan, Paris, London, New York, and San Francisco. And that was fun. It was great. It was wonderful to be able to think more on a strategic level and push down the tactics. But yeah, I went back again to an early stage company right after that.
Well, let's talk about Coactive here. So I know Coactive is one example of startup that you joined where you were the first marketing hire. What was going on when you joined? What was happening just from a marketing perspective when you entered the org?
Yeah, I think that the reason they were looking for a full-time person is that they had spent a lot of, careful thought and time into building out the product and establishing their first customers. And their first customers are incredibly impressive. It's like it's NBC, Thomson Reuters, Lowe's, brand name companies that everyone in my family can recognize, right? And they said, now it's time that we need to actually build and scale a real marketing organization and really drive us to the next level in terms of penetrating a market and really going through a growth stage. And I was incredibly impressed by what I saw. So just a quick explanation for your audience. So Coactive AI, I mean, what they do is they help companies get more out of their image and video information, use leveraging AI. And there are 3 big use cases. One is content discovery or search. So if you are sitting on millions of minutes of video and you're trying to find that perfect moment, like it's incredibly hard to do today. Or if you are a stock image company sitting on, a million stock images, it's still very hard to find what you need today. And it's very, very hard to get people to tag that information manually. And we're with AI, without any metadata at all, we're able to really, really quickly find you exactly the moment that you need. The second part is content optimization, which is like, hey, once you found what you need, how do you use that for greater personalization, for greater ad targeting, for putting together highlights reels really quickly? And then the third part is kind of content moderation and brand safety. And that would be, we have a major customer that is dealing with a lot of user generated video, and 99% of those videos are totally fine. And they go through human review and you put them up on the web, no problem. And there's that really dangerous 1%, and they had manual review going on. There's a couple problems with content moderation. One is some of the ugly stuff is really, really ugly, and it's very traumatizing for people who have to look at it. And then the volume just keeps growing. So those people are getting overwhelmed. If we have Coactive helping to screen it, we very quickly identify, here's the safe stuff, go ahead and put it on. We also identify, like, here's the really ugly stuff. Like, no one should ever have to look at this, and just kick it out automatically. So you're removing the traumatizing part of the job. So only the things that are kind of in the gray area then get sent to the content moderation team. So you cut out the most horrible aspect of the job, and then you dramatically reduce the volume of work that they have to do. So everybody's happy that content's getting posted more quickly. Everybody's abiding by the safety rules of the company. And, they've saved a lot of time and money in terms of the investment that they have to make in content moderation.
This show is brought to you by Frontlines Media, a podcast production studio that helps B2B founders launch, manage, and grow their own podcast. Now, if you're a founder, you may be thinking, I don't have time to host a podcast. I've got a company to build. Well, that's exactly what we built our service to do. You show up and host, and we handle literally everything else. To set up a call to discuss launching your own podcast, visit frontlines.io/podcast. Now, back to today's episode.
Now, I know you're 3 months into the journey so far, a little over 3 months. Talk to us about the first 3 months.
Yeah, I mean, the 3 months are very exciting. I'm getting to know the company. There are a lot of really amazing people who work at the company. Both the two founders, Cody Coleman and Will Gaviria Rojas, they're really amazing people. And their vision for the company and the culture also is very compelling. Compelling enough that I'm commuting from Berkeley to San Jose for work, which is, for people who are not in the Bay Area, it's a little bit of a trek. And what we've done is, in that 3 months, I think we've done more marketing, outbound campaigns, events in this 3-month period than we had at any other period during the company. And if you look at the month before I joined versus the month after, like, there's been a 70% increase in the amount of leads that are coming into the system. And if you look at the number of deals that we have, like the number of deals that we've done in the last 3.5 months exceeds the 12 months prior to me being there. Because I'm magic and I showed up. I mean, partially, we're right at that stage in the company. Like, they brought me in at the right time. We're growing the sales team at the right time. I think we have a really compelling product, and we're all trying to communicate with each other, right? There's a lot of experimentation that's going on. They hadn't done a lot of marketing before I got there. And so we're trying to figure out what is the right way of approaching this market, has the best way of explaining our product. Like, what are the things that people are really looking for? Because this is new. Like, there's not a video AI purchasing department at companies, right? Like, that doesn't exist. So we're talking to a lot of different people in different parts of the organization. Companies are just figuring out, okay, what do we really need? How do we use AI for it? Who should be buying it? Whose budget comes out? Does it come from? And we're trying to figure out how to sell to them at the same time. And so it's fun because we're meeting a lot of really interesting people and getting to hear about a lot of interesting problems. And the amazing thing about AI is it has captured the imagination in such a way that people are like, well, maybe AI can solve this problem. And we're being asked to come in and look at things that, I used to remember at prior companies, be like, hey, you really need us to help with your problem. And like, the customer just didn't, he's like, not as aware of like, oh, here are all the ways that you can help me out. And once they see Coactive in action, they're like, wow, there are so many different ways that we can think about putting you guys into action. And it's exciting. And we're like, okay, but we got to kind of stay focused on where can we provide the best value very early on. I mean, this is, and for myself as a marketer, like, I've been in a number of companies where I'm not the buyer, right? I'm selling to a technologist. I'm understanding the buyer. I'm helping craft the demo and craft the story for it to be compelling to that person. And when the CEO, Cody Coleman, he gave me a demo of this product, I was like, I understand exactly the value of this product. I have been the person going through the video archive and spending hours saying, I'm looking for the perfect moment and I hope I find it sometime soon. And I've already spent 4 hours, and do I invest another 4 hours? And to see him just type in like, hey, I'm looking for this. and it pops up on the screen, my jaw nearly hit the floor. I was like, you don't know how many hours of my life you could have saved. Same thing with stock image search, right? You're sitting there, I'm still looking for the perfect thing. And you kind of settle for, well, it took me 3 hours to find this set of images. I'm just going to stop because my eyeballs are going to start bleeding. And for it to go through and just say, hey, look, you were looking for a stock image that looks like this. Let's type this in and we'll put in all this data and like all these perfect images pop out. You're like, wow, this is truly amazing. So that's another joy of this company for me is like, hey, I so deeply understand some of the pain points here that I can very enthusiastically be an endorser for the product.
I need to find something like that for all of our podcasts. I've done about 1,200 interviews in the last 3 years. And all the time I'm like, it'd be really fun to write an article about an event strategy, but I can't remember, what podcast interviews talked about events, which didn't, and like the library's too vast.
Yeah, exactly. And you're the guy who experienced it, right? Like you heard every single word, and yet it just blows your mind to try and go through that volume of content. And so like having something like Coactive allows you to go through and hey, every time someone says event strategy for X, I need it and it will find it for you.
Oh, that's so smart. Very cool technology. Wait, is Will, you mentioned Will from Columbia? By chance?
Yeah, he is originally. Yeah.
He won the podcast then. I think I had him like a year ago on the podcast.
Oh, really? Oh, fantastic.
But he said his name, but yeah, awesome company. What about when you started to build out the strategy? Were there any things that you previously did at other startups that you said, we're not going to even waste time on here, we're not going to include?
We're kind of in the brainstorming phase because like I mentioned, we haven't done a lot of marketing before. So we're more in the, hey, what are the things that we've seen that kind of fits that we think would be effective here? And let's go try it. Right.
Yep.
And one of those things that we're doing are private events. So one of the things I mentioned is like, people are just figuring out, hey, how can I use AI to do this? Like there's not a blueprint on the customer side for how do you define this problem? How do you address this problem? And some of the things that we're doing is we're just trying to get those people together and say, hey, if you are struggling with content and how to make sense of it and how to find it and how to optimize it, make money off of it or save money with it, let's just all get into a room and we're not going to beat you over the head with this is why we're so awesome. Like we're just here to facilitate that conversation and listen in on that conversation and opine on it. But the value is from having those people in a room, helping them realize that they're facing similar problems and then help them figure out like, okay, what are the things that you need to do to put together in order to make this all work?
What's the sweet spot for event size? Have you figured that out yet? Is it 6 people, 12 people? 20?
Yeah, we haven't figured that out yet. I mean, our events have been ranging more like 12 to 25 people because that's kind of what we can handle right now. And we are kicking around like, hey, do we do a much larger event where it's not a dinner, it's not a workshop, it's like a real event, right? Or do we keep working with partners and going to their events and things like that? So there's a lot of different things that we're experimenting with right now. And we're just trying to figure out, hey, what's the best thing? Now, but one of the things that you and I were talking about earlier is like, hey, there are certain traps that kind of early stage startups can get in. And one is really knowing your audience. And so a lot of early stage tech CEOs will be like, great, I'm ready to do marketing. I need to do social media and Google ads, right? And you're like, is your audience paying attention to social media and Google ads? So there's, helping them understand like, hey, who are you really trying to talk to and what's their problem and how complex is it and what do they need to know? And, what we're finding from this one is like, I don't think anyone's looking for Google ads on this one. So there are things where like, hey, we're not doing that, not because they're inherently bad, but just that doesn't really fit who our audience is. And really thinking that through carefully, I think is something that, tech startups need to be aware of when they start thinking about, hey, what initial marketing do we want to do and test?
Well, it sounds like it's a category creation play, right? Like there is no established category. There's no line item. So for you to drive traffic wouldn't even make sense because there is no existing demand. Do I have that right?
Well, there are existing pain points, right? It's just people haven't figured out the language to articulate it yet. And part of the opportunity is for us to walk in and say, hey, how can we help you to articulate that, right? And how can we explain to you what we do and see if it fits? And also say, okay, it's Coactive plus somebody else, perhaps one of our partners, and that's going to give us the complete solution for solving this particular problem. Or like there's a lot of people who are using digital asset management systems. It's like, hey, how does Coactive work with our digital asset management systems so that we can get the most out of it? So everybody's trying to figure out that problem. So there is a category creation problem. I have to admit, I have a little bit of a beef with the category creation concept because companies do not create categories. The market creates the category. It's how quickly can you see it and help shape it and then serve that category. And there's a lot of work that goes into it. I mean, I think a lot of people kind of say, hey, yes, we want to do category creation. You're doing your own marketing and you're creating the category at the same time. It's actually, you created two jobs. And, if you go back to thinking about, hey, what are some other companies that have been very successful? There have been some companies who've been wildly successful in technology, and they did not create the category, right? So it's like Salesforce was not the first CRM company, wildly successful company. They were the ones who were trying to do it in the cloud. They started off with SMB. There were aspects of it that were very fresh and new and addressing a market that had not been addressed before. They didn't create that category. It's okay to not be a category creator. You can still have a wildly successful company without being a category creator.
This show is brought to you by the Global Talent Co., a marketing leader's best friend in these times of budget cuts and efficient growth. We help marketing leaders find, hire, vet, and manage amazing marketing talent for 50 to 70% less than their US and European counterparts. To book a free consultation, visit globaltalent.co.
I went down the path of category creation like 5 years ago. I was obsessed with it, and I have since come around to not really believing in it. I think a lot of those
Really? Okay.
those stories
Wow.
that you read about, they weren't like really that, right? It wasn't someone just sitting around naming a category, everyone using it, then they just, right off into the sunset. Like they're messy stories for the most part. A lot of times I had, what's the company name? Seismic. They do like 400 million ARR. They're sales enablement. They just bought the company that created sales enablement, and that's how they ended up being the leading sales enablement platform. But all of those stories, the more I dug into them, the more I really kind of came to that conclusion. And I tried it myself a few times. We have a podcast as a service solution. We were trying to create a category, calling it all these stupid things, and like it started working when we just accepted like the category that we were in and just positioned ourselves in that category. And I wasted a lot of time, a lot of money trying to do that. And I know a lot of other founders, a lot of other marketers there realizing that like that's not the best playbook and it's very hard, very expensive.
Yes. Yeah, it is. And then that's another thing that I think some founders take some time to wrap their head around is it's actually good to have competition. It's good to be in a market, right? If you're just like, I want to create a category so then I can say I'm the only one in this category and I dominate this category, people don't really want to sign to you, right? If there's only one person in this category, then people probably don't really have this problem, right? So analysts don't want to cover you if you're a one company market. If this market is real, if it's sizable, if it's growing, then there's going to be more than one person chasing after it. And you kind of need to embrace that fact and embrace that competition and realize that you and your competitor are helping to both advertise the fact that there's a problem here and that there is a market. So your competitor is actually doing you a favor. And don't put yourself in a market of one company.
We had Godard Abel on, the founder of G2, and I was asking him for advice if you wanted to create a category. And that was his number one piece of advice is come to him or come to G2 with a collection of competitors and make the case about why all of you together believe there needs to be a category. It's like if you just come for like one company saying we're the only one, like they're never going to create a category there. There has to be competition.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree.
What else are you experimenting with right now, or do you plan to experiment with outside of private events?
So I think that there's a big educational opportunity that is here in just sort of explaining like, hey, what are all the different things that you can do right now? And not only that, but how do you put it together? I mean, one of the interesting challenges of AI is that I worked at a company called True. We did AI observability, and this was before generative AI. And one of the challenges we had was like getting people to trust machine learning. Like that was the big conversation was machine learning models. And how do you get people to trust machine learning and evaluate it and have confidence in it? We had a lot of companies who were testing machine learning, but they didn't have the trust of how do we actually put this into production and not be concerned about how it might get out of control, right? And we were trying to help address that problem. And this amazing thing happened once generative AI came out and became public and people started experimenting with it, is that people's imagination started running way ahead of what the technology could do. So before we had a problem, like people didn't have enough imagination of how this could be helpful. And instead they were scared of it. And now they were way too enthusiastic about it. And we had people from contacting us. We sold mostly to banks, which are generally conservative organizations, but they saw generative AI and they were like, wow, I can see the cost savings immediately. I want to replace all of my customer service people with generative AI bots. And we're like, you know what? That's not really something you can do yet, So there's been a lot of like, hey, people's imaginations have run wild. And there's these core tech teams who are trying to say like, hey, we're excited, but you're way off in the future. And let's talk about what we can do right now and the benefits and the risks and how do we minimize those risks and realize like, okay, where are the people still really important and what can the AI do and how can they supplement each other? And we run into a similar issue with the video and image space is that people's imaginations are running wild. And there's a lot of things that they imagine that they would like AI to do someday. And you know what? It probably will, but we're not there yet. And so, like, let's talk about what's really state of the art right now that we feel is secure, reliable, stable, and scalable that will address your business use case and keep the people too, because we still need them.
What about AI and the impact on marketing? So I don't know if I have the right number, but I believe there was something from Sam Altman at one point that he had tweeted out, and it was 95%. I think he said that AI is going to replace 95% of what marketers do. I can't remember. Maybe it was 80%. Either way, I didn't really agree with it. What's your thinking there? Do you think AI is...
Yeah, it's kind of similar, to what I was saying before. It's like, hey, on what time scale, right? So there's, people, one of the analogies as I use it, everyone is comfortable with the concept of the self-driving car. Like, we've been talking about the self-driving car now for a really, really long time. And the reality is you can get into a Waymo taxi in San Francisco and drive around, and it's pretty awesome. But you cannot buy a self-driving car. It is still not available. We're still very far away from it truly being available. It's a concept that everyone gets. It's a concept that everyone can imagine, but the timescale is still pretty far off. So a lot of AI is similar to that too. It's like people can imagine this, and your imagination might not be wrong, but it's not today, and it's not going to be tomorrow either. So I think there's a lot that's happening in AI that is incredibly helpful. And we're also already seeing some of the downsides and people getting ahead of themselves. So I think AI is an incredible tool for helping with marketing, and it's very helpful in brainstorming. So it's like you can come up with some ideas. It's like, hey, let's go feed this into some generative AI and see what it has to say too. And sometimes the results are laughably bad. And sometimes the results are like, oh, you know what? It came up with something that I hadn't thought of. And it's not a complete thought, but it's an indication, right? And let's run with that a little bit with some real human beings and see maybe that's going to take us in a direction that's interesting, and we'll add it to our other pile of good ideas. Like, that's one place where I've seen some real value. Or in terms of like communicating with designers, and I've seen this over and over again, is that you can have a product manager come in or a marketer come in and talk to the design team, and they can talk for like 15 minutes. But the designer still is like, I don't really totally understand what you're trying to say, because you're using words to try and describe a future image that doesn't exist yet. And so you can use generative AI and ask it to say, hey, can you create some images that look like this? And then some of them might be not close at all to what you were thinking, and some of them might be close. And then you can show them to a real human designer. It's like, it's kind of like this, but I want it this way. And then the designer's like, okay, now I understand what you are actually going for and the mood you're going for and things like that. And so it serves as a jumping off point that reduces some of that verbal miscommunication time. So it's helpful. It's absolutely helpful. Does it replace marketing? No, absolutely not. And we've had some challenges where, just for example, like interviewing candidates for a variety of different jobs, is that, like many companies, we have a series of interviews, and then we have like a little mini project. We try to not to make it too onerous. It should just take an hour or two of work of a little project to help us understand how you think.
Yeah.
And a lot of people now are using AI for their research, and you can tell. And part of the thing is, like, they'll come in and they'll say, Gen AI is incredibly verbose, and they'll say, hey, we were thinking, how would you think about this problem? And they have like, here's 10 pages of how I think about this problem. And you're like, no, I don't think you thought 10 pages about this problem. So one is like, hey, did you do some additional thinking once you got the initial answer from what you fed Gen AI? And then are you good at discerning which of these ideas are actually worth pursuing and developing, and which of these you should leave by the wayside? And a lot of people are just stopping. They're like, hey, I got an answer, and it's 10 pages long. It really should be 2 pages long. They're not doing the other extra steps that you need to do. And I think that's one of the danger spots that people have, is like, no, okay, that's just a starting point. And how do you take it further? And there's still an incredible value to your own creativity, your own experience, your own judgment, and you need to bring it to bear.
The example I was sharing with my team the other day is I wrote a blog article that was pretty successful about a month ago. And it was my first time that I used AI to write it. It still took me like 4 hours though, but normally it takes me like 12 or 15 hours to write. So like there were savings there, and it was nice to have those savings, but overall, like, it didn't replace it. It was a collaborator. It wasn't just like, all right, write this article and put it out. Otherwise, like, I don't think anyone would have wanted to read it. Like, you can tell. The second it says, we're going to delve right in. Like, there's all these like keywords that are very clear. That's, it's AI. It's the right mindset, what you just described. Now, let's end with some advice. Normally we ask for advice for marketers, but because of your background, you've worked with startups, you've worked with a lot of founders, I'm sure. What advice would you have for founders to do better marketing for their B2B tech?
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's really a lot of founders come from the product and engineering background, and marketing is not something that they have spent a lot of time thinking about, except for as a consumer. Like, hey, do I like that ad? Do I not like that ad? And so they have being the recipient of marketing, but not having to be the practitioner. And I think there's, some thought around, hey, how do I think about marketing as a strategic practice for helping me to understand my market, my audience better, and how I can reach them, and making sure that you're thinking about all of those things from that perspective. And that strategic mindset needs to start determining the tactics and the messages that you do. And the one way I think about it is that often when you're talking to somebody who's never built a house before, sometimes they're like, hey, I want it to be blue. I want it to kind of look like this on the outside. And they're thinking about the finishes and they're thinking about the color, but they're not thinking about, hey, I need the foundation to be like this, right? And I need it to be up to code or beyond code. I'm really worried about earthquakes. I need it to be beyond code for earthquakes. And so it's helping them think about it. Hey, let's think about the color last. Let's think about the foundation first. And so it's like start thinking about what are the foundations of marketing that you really want to put in place? What do you want to deeply understand in order to be effective in really reaching out and sending out your message, differentiating your company and your product, and driving that initial revenue that's going to serve as the flywheel for you to grow.
I love that advice, and I've really loved this conversation. Before we wrap up, if there's anyone listening in that just wants to follow along with you, where should we send them?
Oh, I'm Barbara at coactive.ai.
Amazing. Barbara, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
All right. Take care, Brett.
This episode of Category Visionaries is brought to you by Frontlines Media, Silicon Valley's leading podcast production studio. If you're a B2B founder looking for help launching and growing your own podcast, visit frontlines.io/podcast. And for the latest episode, search for Category Visionaries on your podcast platform of choice. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode.